Hello and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to business confidence. My guest this week is Steve Jack, owner and managing director of Gem Cable Solutions. Now, they're a leading UK manufacturer, and if you haven't heard of them, they provide cable, fibre and network solutions all over the world. This is a very technical and precision manufacturing kind of world. It's about as far removed from my world as it's possible to be. But the one thing I do have in common with Steve is that we've spent many happy hours on the side of a football pitch together as our sons play for the respective local side. And over the years, as I've spoken to Steve, I've realised what an amazing story he has to tell. His backstory is incredible. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast. There's so many good stories in there. So let's start with Steve's origins in the Northeast.
I was born in 1966 in a place called South Shields, which is between Sunderland and Newcastle on the coast there. Really, from a very early age, my big thing was actually wires and cables and connectors and things like that, to a point where from being 5-year-old, I used to have little bits of batteries and cables and make various different circuits and things. And I was really always interested in that. And then when I was 7, I remember saying to my mum, "Mum, I need to use 240 volts." She goes, "What are you on about, Stephen?" I goes, "Well, I need to use mains electricity from this point onwards." You know, she goes, "Well, okay, but just don't blow the house up." And so from that point, I just went, okay, this is why I really like doing it. I really like this thing about understanding how electricity works and how things can be manipulated to change circuits and things like that. So I always had this real interest in cables and wires and making things work, as I say. And really, when I sort of went through school and college and different things, electricity was always my thing. Electrical circuits, diagrams, things like that. And in 1984, I was still up in the Northeast, and the miners' strike was on. And I thought to myself, there's nothing really here for me. My dad was a miner, my mum was a nurse, and so I thought, well, what am I going to do? So we didn't have much money. Obviously, my dad was on managed to scrape together £50. And I said to some friends, I says, "Look, guys, do you want to come down to London for a weekend?" And it was, "What do you mean?" I goes, "Well, this one guy had a transit van." And I says, "Well, you come down to London for a weekend. I've got £50. We'll have a weekend in London, and then that'll get me down there. And then you guys can go back home again, and I'm going to stay." And they said, "Well, what do you mean?" I goes, "Well, I'm not going to stay here anymore." I says, "Because the miners' strike's on, there's nothing happening in the Northeast. I want to do something different. I want to really make a difference for my life. So I'm going to move to London." I goes, "Well, you'll be back in a few weeks." And I said, "Well, let's see how it goes." So anyway, we jumped in this transit van, came down with my £50, spent the weekend with my friends, going on London, various other sites and what have you. And then we went, and Sunday night they went back. And then Monday morning, I went to the job centre, went with my little circuits that I had and made and different things, went to this company, and then it started me literally the next day. I was there for a year or so. And then, anyway, I managed to get a job at British Aerospace in Hatfield.
Yeah.
And so I started working at British Aerospace, managed to get myself an apprenticeship there, done various different things within British Aerospace, moved through the ranks within the company, and from working on the 146 plane, went on the 125, got seconded up to Brough, worked on the Hawk fighter jet, worked on a few other projects, and then was there until it closed down, till the site closed. I was actually going to move to Woodford. I got offered to move to Woodford with British Aerospace when the British Aerospace site closed in Hatfield. But I just thought, I'll tell you what, I don't want to move back to the Northeast again. I want to to the north rather. I'll take my chance here. And so I then said, well, okay, what am I going to do? So I took my redundancy money from British Aerospace, as everyone had been made redundant. And then me and my wife she was working in Croydon at the time, and Sinead, as you know. And then we moved down to Croydon, and I went, what am I going to do with this redundancy money? So it was coming up to Christmas, so I thought, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up a toy shop. So I took all my redundancy money, never hadn't run a toy shop before, and went to the East End of London, and went to the sort of various warehouses, spent all my redundancy money on toys, opened up a toy shop in Bradford, and quadrupled my redundancy money in a matter of months. So that worked really well. So I done that. And then I got offered a position at Airbus. And so I then said, okay, so I started traveling from Croydon up to Stevenage every day, And eventually I sort of we moved back to the Hertfordshire area. Went to Airbus, started on the electrical side doing satellites integration, and then eventually moved into the launch team. So I then moved from just doing the integration within Stevenage to being part of the launch team, and then moved from Stevenage, I'd go to Toulouse, do the integration, simulations, various other activities on the electrical side, and then went from that to French Guiana and do the launch.
Right.
What I used to do is I would be the last person rather to actually touch the satellite, and I would do that. I would put the board on the satellite to the rocket, and then the satellite would launch or the rocket would launch, and then that would be it. And I'd come back to Stevenage and we'd start all over again.
Wow. Well, that's already a sort of tour de force. Two questions about that. One is, when you were in that redundancy situation where you decided to start the toy shop, had it occurred to you before that I'd love to be an entrepreneur, whether it was in toys or anything else? And the second thing is, when you went back into being employed after that, did that help you in any way, sort of having had that entrepreneurial experience in terms of the way you approached your employment period?
I think it's there's a few things on that really with regards to being able to take a bit of a risk and do things and see the bigger picture and what potentially could be if you do that. The same as when I came down here with a £50 in my pocket, or I decided to spend all my redundancy money on toys. It was actually, well, I can see the potential if I get this right, and be able to say, well, rather than just doing the standard thing, well, I'll keep it until I need it and what have you. Tell you what, I'll invest it in myself because I believe in myself. I believe that what I'm able to do is actually will benefit in the end. So I'll believe in myself. I'll do it. I'll put my money where my mouth is, type of thing, and I'll go for it. And so that's always been, I think, within me. It's to some degree, but actually, as you do these things, and without being having the ability to sort of say to my mum, "Let me use 240 volts at 7-year-old," or "I'm going to jump in a transit van at sort of 18 years old," or wherever it may be. I'll spend all my redundancy money on toys a bit later on and open up a toy shop, which I had no experience of. And with all the various different things I've done after that, I've always been actually this bit of self-belief in what you're able to do, and whether you sort of, even if you get it wrong, at least I'll have tried, and I'll have tried sort of to the point where it'll be other circumstances which will make it not work for one reason or another. But vast majority of the time, it does work because you give it some thought. You've done a bit of homework. I didn't just open up a toy shop. I actually went, well, what's the pricing model going to be? Never had thought of that. I just had the idea. Well, I've obviously got to sell it. How much is my rent going to be? What am I going to? How am I going to restock? Things like that. And I was learning on the job, but I've done it, and as I say, I quadrupled my redundancy pay.
Right. And so when you then went back into employment, did that help you in terms of, did it make you a sort of entrepreneur amongst maybe a culture that perhaps wasn't entrepreneurial?
That was going into Airbus. I think that's what's led me to. So I went in as an electrical engineer in Airbus, and then very quickly I moved through the ranks to become an electrical engineer within the launch team. Because again, it's having that sort of mindset of being able to see the bigger picture. Because we're building things which are bespoke, first off, slightly outside the norm, and actually looking at something and saying, this is how things can be, how we can make improvements. And it's not just all about making money, it's actually how to make things better and how to sort of engineer something better. And I think having that engineering mindset where you can adapt and evolve is actually really is a benefit. And you can apply that in various different forms, if you like, whether it be in engineering, whether it be in finance, whether it be in HR or operations, or whatever I may do as I do now as a MD. So, so I think that's how I see things. And some of it's natural, some of it's a natural bit, some of it's learned, some of it's learned through experience. And, but always sort of, I think the key was always believing you are doing things for the right, rather than just doing it for the sake of doing it. You're doing it for the right reasons, shall I say.
Okay, so let's move on from you touching the rocket in French Guiana, being the last person to touch the rocket. So how was the journey then from there to the area that I know you in as Gem Cable Solutions?
Yeah, so I left there The last launch I done was one called ST1, which was in France. So I was in Toulouse. So I went from Toulouse to Guyana. I'd done the launch. So while the World Cup was on, and so that was from '98 through to 2000. We were on that launch, and then basically it was, well, this isn't going to. I want to try something different. I'd only really had two proper jobs. I'd worked at British Aerospace. I'd worked at Airbus. And then I thought, I want to do something different. I want to try something different. So actually, my wife spotted this job in the local paper and said, "Oh, look at this. They want an engineering manager for this cabling company. The ideal for you." So I applied for it and became the engineering manager, got the job basically, and applied for it and said, "Look, I can change your company." So that was in 2000. And then over the next 4 years, really, I was a company that already existed. The company had been going from 1986, servicing the telecoms market. And what I said to the owner then was, I think I can change your company. I can do some other things, bringing my experience in from the aerospace market and making this company a better company, if you like. So I sort of put into other areas of business. So my sort of forte, I suppose, is safety critical areas of business where it's sort of, high cost of failure applications, as we say. And so that's what I've done over the next 4 years. I proceeded to sort of position the company in different areas. I took over various different departments. I really came in as engineer manager, but I took over the sales, I took over the CAD position, I took over the production, I took over all the various different elements of the business, really, some of the financial areas as well. And then in 2004, the previous owner wanted to look to retire, and I was really the obvious candidate to take over the company. So we made a bit of a negotiation between the two of us, and we came to an arrangement. And then so from 2004 onwards, I've been the managing director and owner of the company. So
did that period where you were getting involved in all sorts of areas of the business, well, that must have been very educational in terms of running a business in that way, and also seeing what the potential and the pitfalls of growing the business would be.
Yeah, I think it really is. I think it's this thing about not being afraid to do things which are outside your area of expertise. But if you put the effort in, I didn't know anything about. I remember saying we used to have a guy who did the CAD, the computer-aided design, and the guy left, and the previous owner said to me, he said, "Well, Steve, you just do that," because I don't know anything about CAD. Because you're very capable, you can learn it, and so I did. So I just learned it. So okay, well, if I can do that, and then the salesperson left. Well, you do it on the sales. Okay, well, I'm not a salesperson. Well, you are now. So, and I think, yeah, okay, and nothing sort of fazed me in that. I was just, okay, well, actually, and at that point, when I was taking over these various different departments and taking ownership of them, I didn't actually know at that point I was going to be taking over the company. But in hindsight, it was the best thing I could have ever done, because that then gave me that sort of overview of the whole company, the whole operation of how it works. Without that, I don't think I would have been able to sort of start on day one and move it forward. So I knew exactly what was happening in each department, how it all ran, and so I was able to take it from there.
So that might have been a great education. Nevertheless, when a company grows, any leader of that business, once you became the leader of that business, also probably needs to sometimes step back from the departmental sort of management and so on. What's your role to sort of then make sure that the people that you got in to help you were sort of knew how to do the job well, or had particular specialist expertise, or did it not work like that?
Well, no, it wasn't quite like that. What happened was slightly, that came a bit later on. What we done, because the company, when I first took over, was slightly larger than what it was once I'd taken over. So I actually sort of downsized the company. I thought we were too top heavy for various areas. We had someone in charge of pencil sharpeners, someone in charge of paper clips, and this, that, and the other. It was too much. So, and having run or had an overview of all the departments, I went, okay, I'll just run everything. And I did. So for the first 2 years, there was myself, and there was a lady I worked with and still friends with now. She didn't work for the company, but we're still chatting now and again. We just ran a lot. We just ran everything, and just all departments, everything. If someone needed paper clips, we were the ones that purchased them. Cable assemblies, testing, drawings, production, the whole element, HR, the whole thing. And we just learned everything as we were doing it, because on the Friday, before I took over, on the Friday, I was engineering manager. On the Monday morning, I was owner managing director.
Yeah.
And I just went, well, who does everything? I remember going to the bank and I'm saying, well, just crack on. Okay, what do I do? I don't know. And I just thought, well, I'm on my own. Just get on with it and just move. Just keep going.
It brings about a really interesting question, because often when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I'm talking about their journey of growth and so on. But of course, the reality is that there are many journeys where there isn't growth, and you're downsizing, or you have to make the necessary changes and so on. Did you find that sort of personally a difficult period? I mean, like having to tell people maybe they couldn't work for you anymore, or was it just something you had to sort of just do and get through?
I think I learned pretty quickly that you've got to it's for the greater good of everybody. And if it's something isn't working, you've got to stop it there and then, because I remember we had one person I did bring in very early on, 2006 maybe, something like that. And I thought, well, we're a bit more stable now. I'll get somebody doing the finance, and brought somebody in, and very quickly realised that this lady wasn't up for the job. She wasn't bringing the money in, and she was actually going to bring the company down really quickly, because she just wasn't managing the cash flow and everything else. And so we had a hard company really quickly. And but I thought, if I don't do this, we're all going to be out of a job, everybody. And so it's not pleasant. It's not the part of the job I particularly relish in, to be honest, I must admit. But it's something which is a necessary sort of part of the role to be. I feel that you've got a sense of responsibility for all the employees, not just a single person.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're fair, and we're honest, upfront engineering type company, and we pay fairly, and we engage with people, and we've got the right values. But I've still got a responsibility for all the staff, not just a single person. And so we need people to be able to work, and also the type of work we do, the safety critical nature of our business I've got to have the right staff, and if I can't train somebody to do that job, and it's making mistakes, and these things are going on planes or trains or nuclear reactors and things like that, they've got to be right. So we've got to be sure that the staff we've got are the right people for the job, not just it's not a social club. It's a workplace of business.
And in that journey that people are going on, that you've sort of, after your initial sort of that sort of downsizing period, I know that you've had sort of great success in sort of growing the video. And there's been challenges, external challenges. Like, I remember working with you around the time of Brexit, for example, where that must have thrown a complete googly at you in terms of the trading relationships. A lot of your work was with over in Europe, but also I know you've been investing quite a lot in facilities. I mean, what have been the sort of the main challenges, and how has you as a leader dealt with those challenges?
The challenges are on a daily basis, really, and you've got the big ones. I took over in 2004, as I say. 2008, there was the telecoms crash, and up to 2010. We were, as I said previously, were predominantly in the telecoms market. Then I'd moved into other sectors. So we managed to negotiate through the recession from 2008 through to 2010. And as you say, Brexit happened, and the challenges never stopped, really. And I think you've got to be able to learn how to ride those in a way that doesn't sort of overwhelm you, if you like. You've got to be able to sort of say, well, actually, I always think back. I came here with £50 in my pocket. I'll be okay, no matter what. And I think again, it's about that belief of self-belief. If you like, well, I'll make the right decision one way or the other. So there was challenges of I'd say that the non-stop, really. And as the company's getting bigger, as you know now, when you came previously, we only had this one site in St Albans. I've now got another site in Welwyn Garden City as well, which is again led to challenges about running two sites, and the customers are much larger now. We've got the problems with Brexit. We've got the problems with cash flow with regards to our suppliers are wanting paid up front, or customers aren't wanting to pay us until they've received the goods. We're having to order stuff months in advance. The materials we're using are considerably more expensive because they're going into such harsh environments of nuclear and things like that. The cash flows causing issues there with regards to that. So there's multiple challenges, staffing issues, engineering shortage skills. There's all sorts of different things, but it's being able to sort of take those challenges and grow with them really, but also actually having the willingness to let go of some of those things. For instance, now we have full-time HR, which previously I used to do myself, and so now that person runs the HR. We have full-time quality department. Well, actually, which I used to run myself. I used to do all those elements of that. So having the faith in the people that you employ to be able to do that role actually sort of alleviates some of those internal issues. If you're spinning too many plates yourself continuously, eventually some of those plates are going to fall.
So when you've been handing over those plates, for others to spin, that's kind of left you with freedom to do what? To grow the business?
So I think we're taking that helicopter view, if you like. We sort of alluded to before, the company was probably sort of in a wagon wheel shape, if you like, with me in the centre. And all roads lead to Steve, if you like. So that was the way. And what we're trying to do now is become more of a swimming pool structure. So, okay, I'm still at the head of the building business, but is different people have got the head of their lane, if you like. So, whether that be HR, be finance, it be sort of operations, be engineering, production, sales, whatever it might be. So we have heads of department now. So, and those heads of department then report in. So, in that structure is much more I've got to have faith in the people that I employ to be able to run their department and report in that we're all on the same page, heading in the same direction. And I think that's the difference. So it's about getting the right people in position and sort of having the faith to let go of that and say, well, actually, I trust these people to do this job. The same as I was trusted when 20 odd years ago when I came into the company the first time round. So that's how I see it.
I mean, nobody's above a little self-analysis. What would you say was your biggest fault, in as an entrepreneur? I mean, what would others around you say, perhaps?
I'll say this thing, sort of slightly contradicting myself, I suppose, but in saying this thing about sort of letting go and having run the company, as I say, pretty much single-handedly in the early days, and just a couple of people, really, a few people, then gradually letting go and realizing that people are capable of running their own department. And sometimes maybe not micromanaging, but maybe getting involved where I don't need to be involved and I don't need to be so hands-on, shall we say. That is probably been the biggest challenge, but also actually it's been quite liberating, if you like, as that's gone on. And it's been relatively recent. But there's always things to do and there's always stuff to keep me busy. I'd say this taking on a second site has been a real challenge. And really, I've run that sort of move, if you like. Deciding to invest in the company over lockdown. We've done our biggest investments during lockdown ever in the history of the company. That was a major challenge and took some gumption to be able to say, well, actually, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to invest really heavily during lockdown while everybody else was working from home. I decided to build a whole new infrastructure. And so I didn't furlough anybody during that time, but I looked at the whole business and said, the business is going to survive. I'm going to invest in the business and I'm going to invest really heavily and I'm going to come back and now we have this state-of-the-art clean room.
That must have been a very difficult decision to take, when everybody around you is kind of literally physically kind of withdrawing, in terms of other businesses, and there's this kind of global pandemic going on. I mean, was it a sort of logical commercial decision for you? Were you really sticking your neck out at that point?
We just before that, we had a clean room. I don't know if most people know what a clean room is, but if you see with the guys wearing the protective gear and things like that, we are building stuff for space. We were building stuff for all sorts of different areas, but predominantly space was our main sort of area of business. So we just done the ExoMars rover project for Airbus just before the lockdown, and so we said, okay, the business is stable. We've got a good business. We just need to manage this. We've then tried with the guys working from home, building products, because we didn't know how it was going to work with everyone sort of together in a clean room and different things. So we ran the business like that. We had a couple of people in, myself, my wife, this guy, and a stores person. And between the four of us, we kept everybody working. So we didn't furlough anyone. And I just, again, it's about having faith in your own sort of company and the business, really, I suppose, is to say, actually, I think we're going to be okay. Everybody's working from home. I've got the building's virtually empty. I tell you what I'll do. I'll build this whole new infrastructure while everyone's out of the building. It means I don't then have to shut down later on if I decide to do this later on. It makes perfect sense for the timing. I know it's a bit of a risk because we're in the middle of a pandemic, but I've got faith in the company, and I've got faith I'm going to come back from this. So I did. So I built this whole state-of-the-art clean room infrastructure while everybody was working from home. And when the guys came back, when this is what I've been doing while he's been working from home, plus obviously managing the company and everything else. And so, I go back to your original point about what do you do as a owner, managing director, when you've got people running the company maybe underneath you. You actually look at the longer term picture. You look for the longer term strategy and go, well, where's the company going to be? Where is it going to end up? And what do I need to be doing now to make this a sustainable long-term company for myself, my family, my employees, their families, everybody else? And so that's what I look at, really, rather than the day-to-day.
And now, has that evolution of mindset, has that been helped by sort of things like a lot of people go through, like mentoring and coaching and so on? Has that changed your view? I mean, I know a lot of listeners would be interested in people's personal development through things like mentoring and coaching.
Yeah. So I use a business coach. As I say, I'm an engineer who took over as a managing director. So I never believe that I know everything about anything. I always think that there's things I can learn, and I'm very willing to listen to other people. And so I do have a business coach, a local business coach in St Albans, Martin Purvis. So he's part of Action Coach. And we've been together for a few years now, and we work on various different aspects of the business, whether it be the sales or the marketing or looking at the whole business as a whole and how we're going to do things. And I think sometimes as well, it's about that sounding board, and maybe, you've got, I can think this is a really good idea, but maybe he might have a different sort of view on that and maybe challenge me a bit on some of my thinking, which is actually a really good thing. Be challenged, to be sort of held to account, if you like, for my own actions. Well, Steve, you said you were going to do this. Have you done it? No, well, no, I haven't. Well, why not?
I think that's a really important thing. And it's a recurring theme of these interviews, if you like, is that sometimes you need somebody who is either a little bit of distance away, able to give an objective view, or if you're learning a new skill, is kind of one step above, where you are, so that you can learn that skill or evolve in some way. And so one thing that comes through from a lot of these interviews is the power of mentoring and coaching. One question I do want to ask you is that, you've referred to the £50 in your pocket and, sort of coming down from the Northeast, and this kind of sense of confidence from a very young age. You just went and did things and you weren't afraid to take risks. Now, a lot of people that I've discovered are people who, are entrepreneurs, maybe in a slightly different vein, that sometimes they might have everything that they have, but maybe they don't have the innate sense of confidence that you have. I mean, is confidence, in your view, something that you either have or you don't, or is confidence, like a lot of things, a learnable skill?
No, I think it's a learnable skill. I really do. I think, if I maybe now sitting here today, I think, oh no, I've always had it. Maybe, but I think I'm better at sort of being confident to be able to present, whether it be sort of meeting people, like going to exhibitions, but previously I might have been a bit nervous about doing some of those things, going up and pitching for a bit of business, or going to an exhibition and stopping strangers and speaking to them, that's thing. So I'm better at that now than I was years ago. So I maybe would have done it because I thought it needs to be done, but I would have been very nervous about doing some of that. Whereas now the confidence is growing within me. And the more success you have, the more confident you get. You think, well, actually, things aren't so bad. And whether it be, I'm quite keen on, we've just done an exhibition a few weeks ago. I'm quite keen on taking the apprentices to exhibitions and things like that, to give them the confidence to go out there and take them outside their comfort zone and actually go and stop that person there, go and have start a conversation with them about cables and this and after a while they're very nervous about doing it, and then after a while they get used to doing it. And I think people are able to learn new things, the same as I was able to learn new things. As going back to the thing about doing the CAD drawings or whatever I was doing, whether it was finance and things like that, I wasn't as confident when I first started as I am now, about making those decisions. So a vast majority of what I do now has been learned. It's not because I was so sure of myself at the early stages. It's actually pretty much all of it's been learned. But some of it is the innate ability to say, well, actually, if it goes wrong, I'll just live with the consequences, or I'll make it better next time. I think that's it. Not sort of saying, well, actually, I've gotten it wrong. I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to try that thing again. Well, actually, I will try it again, but next time I'll just do it better.
Yeah.
I've learned.
Yeah, brilliant. This has been fantastic. I mean, just for the benefit of our listeners, what are you up to at the moment? What's next on the horizon? I mean, is there anything that you're working on that isn't subject to restrictive clauses that you're able to talk about or particularly excited about?
Yeah. So there's a few things. So we've actually, there's a couple of things. We just say we're doing the cables which are doing the manipulation of the robotic arms which go into the Fukushima site in Japan. So these are robotic arms which actually go into the nuclear reactor, and they actually clean up the debris. And so we're developing all that with the customer and really heavily involved in that, right from the robotic arm all the way through to the actual infrastructure, the cabinet builds and various things there. That's why we took on the second side. We've also just done the biomass project for Airbus, which has been a fantastic project to work on. We've recently just delivered the first test phase of a new radar system for Network Rail, which is using for the level crossing systems, rather than using just cameras or manual. They actually use a radar to detect whether a child or a dog or a person has gone onto the network, and that would stop the train. So we're running 262 sites, and we've just done the first test site up in York on that, and now we're going to run that across the UK. So there's lots going on. There's a huge amount of different things going on. And so it makes it interesting, not just for me, but for the staff as well, to be able to see these are the projects you're working on, whether it be nuclear reactors or into space or into level crossing systems. It's, we don't build just the same thing day in, day out. There's exciting things and projects which make a difference to people's lives.
That's fantastic. I suppose one final question is that, so for success for you, ultimately for Gem Cable, would be what? Would it be that one day you could go off on holiday for a month or something, and then the business would just carry on as normal, or even sort of, and prosper and so on, and people will go, who's this Steve Jack guy? Oh, well, he's the owner, but you don't actually see him around that much these days, because maybe you might be sort of taking more of a backseat. Is that what you want, or do you just want to keep on working for as long as possible?
It's a bit of both, really. I think after, I've always worked since I'm 56, so doing this for quite some time, and it would be nice to try something different apart from cables, I suppose. But I love engineering. I love the technical challenges, and because the things that we do are so technically challenging, they can really, get your mind racing about how we can solve some of these issues, because the things just aren't worked out beforehand. We've got to really get involved with these challenging sort of aspects of the work, and to just go off and play golf or whatever and go on walks and things. I think maybe it might be nice now and again, but I think I would miss the challenge, shall we say. So I'm quite keen just to keep going at the moment. I think that's where I see myself, so young enough to be able to keep going.
Well, I can't imagine Steve spending very much time on the golf course anytime soon. I think that he's still so into what he's doing in terms of the business, but his enthusiasm is there for all to see. It was a brilliant interview, and the highlights for me probably were his engineering mindset, his willingness to take a risk. I love that story about £50 in his back pocket when he came down to London, the story of his business's growth since then, and also his views on letting go, which I think is something that taxes a lot of successful entrepreneurs about how they manage that process. So thank you to Steve, and thank you to listeners for tuning in. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your podcast provider. And if you want to find more about the Merri-Cast or our Business Merrible Media, you can find us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to join us for our next episode. But until then, thanks for listening.